Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Wrongful dismissal of a central bank governor in Trinidad and Tobago ends in huge compensation order, followed by pending appeal from government. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Thursday, 27th October 2022. Details when we return.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. Former governor of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, Joala Rambaran, is to receive $5.2 million in damages after the court ruled in June that he was wrongfully dismissed by the bank 18 months before his term was due to end. Urvashi Tawari Rupnarayan of TV6 News reports.
The court has awarded some $5.2 million to Joala Rambaran after it found he was wrongfully dismissed as governor of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. The court today ruled on the compensation and found itself having to navigate between the $7.476 million in losses Rambaran's attorneys claim he had foregone and some $3.237 million as put forth by the attorneys representing the Office of the Attorney General. The court hoped for the central bank's statements to assist in its demise, saying, quote, "The court was also of the respectful view, mistaken though it was, that the issue of what the claimant would have been entitled to had he remained employed was something that the parties could have reached an agreement on once the claimant's former employer, the CBTT, provided the numbers. The court was wrong in that regard," end quote. The sum in dispute represents some 18 months of salary and benefits, less income tax and other salary deductions, had Rambaran been allowed to complete his contractual term. The court was called on to determine the values of his salary, telephone, houses, motor vehicle, cafeteria, overseas travel, health plans, and executive medicals in compensation. The court was challenged to determine applicable salary increases, and the figures represented by the AG's office were at variance with that offered by the CBTT. Some of Rambaran's claims were accepted, some denied, and some, like the bonus, required the deliberation of the judge. Rambaran's attorney suggested he was entitled to some $2.6 million in bonus, but the AG's office argued given Rambaran's, quote, egregious conduct in the December 2015 Forex disclosures and the considerable damage occasioned to the reputation of the CBTT, the claimant would not have attained a performance rating of 3 or more for the next 18 months. And so, no performance bonus should be allowed to him, end quote. The court, however, found no evidence of any discord to suggest dissatisfaction with Rambaran, who was still employed as the governor thereafter. He was awarded $1.9 million in bonus. Justice Devendra Rampersad writes, quote, "There is no doubt in the court's mind that the central bank ought to have been more forthright and full and frank in respect of the information and calculations it provided to the court, since it was in the best position to do so. It was the CBTT that had the figures with respect to the claimant's performance rating attributable to up until the date he left, and they failed to provide," end quote. Urvashi Tawari Rupnarayan, TV6 News.
Subsequently, it must be noted that the Ministry of Finance will be appealing that recent High Court judgment which involves the alleged wrongful dismissal of the former Central Bank Governor Joala Rambaran, according to this TTT News item.
The Ministry of Finance will be appealing the recent High Court judgment, which involves the alleged wrongful dismissal of former central bank governor Jawala Rambaran. The Minister of Finance, Com Ibid, said he has taken note of an editorial in a daily newspaper which refers to what it describes as the government's mounting legal costs. The two particular cases which involve the Minister of Finance are Rohini Ramkissoon and Jawala Rambaran versus the state, respectively. The ministry said with respect to both decisions of Ramkissoon and Rambaran, it respectfully disagrees with the decisions of the first instance judges. The ministry said it awaits the outcome of its appeals. High Court Judge Davindra Rampasan ruled in favor of Mr. Rambaran on Wednesday, ordering that compensation be paid in the amount of $5.47 million.
Some 18 years after the death of CRICO executive Russell Teixeira, his wife Karen Nunes Teixeira will receive over $18 million after the final appeal in a medical negligence case was dismissed by the Privy Council on Tuesday. TV6's Urvashi Rupnarayan reports.
The board of the Privy Council dismissed the appeal, instead upholding the 2015 ruling of High Court Judge Vashish Kokaram and the Court of Appeal that the Gulfview Medical Center and Dr. Krishan Chandra Rupchand were negligent in the death of former Finance Minister Karen Nunes Teixeira's husband, Russell Teixeira. As per the judgment delivered today, Nunes Teixeira will receive over $18 million in compensation as initially ruled by Kokaram. The deceased, a former CRICO insurance executive, was 53 years old at the time of his fatal transurethral resectioning of the prostate procedure in 2004. Following the procedure carried out by Teixeira's consultant surgeon Dr. Lester Goetz and anesthetist Dr. Rupchand, neither of whom were employed by Gulfview, nurses noted his urine was heavily blood-stained. Teixeira was taken back into surgery, and after a series of procedures, he died on the operating table while still under general anesthesia about 8 hours later. The appeal court in 2017 found the medical establishment failed to conduct requisite tests to determine the patient's risk of bleeding out, failed to maintain appropriate supplies of blood, transfused O-positive blood to an A-positive patient, and failed in properly monitoring him. The court found the anesthetist failed in conducting the tests, doing a proper pre-assessment of aspirin use. He failed to act quickly enough in transfusing the relevant blood and blood products, failed to ensure adequate blood supplies were in stock, transfused O-positive blood into the deceased, failed to manage the transfusion, administered excessive amounts of blood and blood products, and failed to properly monitor and record the deceased's fluid output. The cause of death was certified to be irreversible shock consistent with DIC. Arvishi Tawari, Rupnarayan, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
A new date has been set for the public hearing into the complaints which were launched by the MPs for Castries Central and Castries South, respectively. Changes will also be made to the composition of the Privileges Committee in St. Lucia, which is presiding over the proceedings. A press conference on the situation was held on Monday afternoon at Parliament's office. Don Nicholas of the DBS News World reports.
Speaker of the House of Assembly Claudius Francis explained that the Privileges Committee is mandated by the rules to conduct hearings in private in order to avoid innocent persons being implicated. However, at the request of the Leader of the Opposition, Alan Chasney, he is seeking a ruling from the House for a referral of this matter on the basis that the proceedings are held in open session. In the interest of fairness, Mr. Francis will also be suggesting to the House that no one with an action against the Leader of the Opposition be part of the Privileges Committee.
I personally do not see how this assists the Leader of the Opposition, but he has asked for it, and that is what we shall do. So when the matter is referred by the House, if it does refer it, the proceedings will be held in open session. I also do not wish any of the proceedings to be tainted with even an appearance of bias. And even as a presiding officer has no authority to determine the composition of the committee, I will be suggesting to the House that no one with an action against the Leader of the Opposition, whether that action be in Parliament or elsewhere should form part of the Committee of Privileges. I repeat that this can only be a suggestion on my part and not an instruction.
To this end, the matter has been postponed to Tuesday, November 1st to facilitate a public hearing in the House where both MPs Richard Frederick and Dr. Ernest Hilaire will be filing a motion.
A matter which should have been dealt with privately tomorrow is going to be dealt with publicly on Tuesday. As I said before, I do not understand how that assists the leader of the opposition, but this is what he requested, and this is what he will get.
As Mr. Francis puts it, the committee is always concerned with a fair process. For the DBS News World, I am Don Nicholas.
The House of Representatives in Jamaica approved the extension of the zones of special operations in 7 communities across Jamaica. National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang, in seeking the extension, argued that the ZOSO has been working and needs more time to have a lasting effect on the crime-riddled communities.
Mount Salem, Denham Town, Parade Gardens, August Town, Norwood, Greenwich Town and Savannah Lamar, 7 of Jamaica's most volatile communities are slated to remain under the zones of special operation as the extension was approved in Parliament on Wednesday. Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says the communities have benefited from the intervention and insists they require more attention to ensure sustainable changes. Although acknowledging that several other communities need the ZOSO, Dr. Chang says there are simply not enough members of the JCF to man the zones.
We need numbers of security personnel on the ground. That's just a raw reality. It is, we'd like to move in more, but each time I have to be advised by the security chiefs and they say, look, we know it needs to be done, but where are the men coming from? We have an aggressive recruitment and training program. I said in the last 12 months, well in 2021, we were able to train 1,260 men for the police force, which meant a net gain of about 900. This year, the target is to go for 1,500. We do not think we have the capacity to train much more than that simultaneously, but we expect out of that to get a net gain of 1,000.
Dr. Chang says he's noticed that social interventions without the security component have not worked effectively.
The areas in terms of what I've had high awareness and we have had a social intervention without the security has not worked as well as we would. So we intend to provide a security cover. But in the long run, we have to make some radical changes to not just provide security in how we provide social services to our communities to ensure their genuine transformation and their sustainability.
He says he intends to take a systematic approach to ensure the money allocated is spent wisely.
I can assure that the Minister of Finance, looking at the budget, will ensure that we can provide the fiscal space to do this on a much wider scale in time. But we have to do it in a manner that ensures that there will be no future assessment and article and research to say we have spent billions of dollars that went nowhere.
The minister says all 7 communities have seen a reduction in major crimes since the declaration of the ZOSO. Veronique Bowen, CVM Live.
More reactions in Jamaica to the recent UK developments as nationals of Guyana, Colombia and Peru will no longer require a visa to travel to the United Kingdom. Some local experts have weighed in on the matter that has been causing quite a stir. Details in this CVM news item.
While angering some Jamaicans, the disclosure has sparked a conversation among international relations experts. The main argument is Jamaicans continue to wreak havoc in foreign countries like the UK. Historian Wayne Chen says that was in fact the case in the early 2000s.
20% of the people who landed in the UK and were denied access were Jamaican. I will go further. Roughly more than half the prisoners, the non-UK prisoners in UK prisons, especially among the women, were Jamaican.
Chen says the successive Jamaican governments have not managed to convince the UK to overcome those issues. He says nationals from the countries that have been granted visa-free access do not have the reputation that Jamaicans have in the UK. He notes, however, Guyana is a special case.
Guyana, in the last 7 or 8 years, has the largest oil discoveries of any single country in the world. At this time, per capita, it has the second highest reserves in the world. Only Kuwait surpasses Ghana in per capita reserves. Ghana's government spending next year will be $1 billion. It is estimated to be $40 billion within the next 20 years per annum. So we're talking about a country with roughly a third of Jamaica's population, with 3 times Jamaica GDP as government spend alone.
Meanwhile, attorney at law Jennifer Housen says the lift should have included Jamaica, as much of Britain's wealth came as a result of Jamaica.
There's 7% black people in the English population, but they make up about 40% of the prison population. And yes, Jamaicans are, blacks are high in that. But let's be careful that it is not Jamaicans coming in, but black British who may be of Jamaican parentage, and we have to be careful in that distinction.
Visa restrictions for working and studying in the UK remain. Veronique Bowen, CVM Live.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick, wishing you a restful weekend. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.